My name is Eileen, and I'm 62 years old. The dining room fell silent when my daughter-in-law Katherine stood up, pointed her finger at me, and shouted, "Get a job and stop being a leech." Everyone froze, waiting for my reaction. To their surprise, I burst out laughing. What Katherine didn't know was that I was worth over $5 million, so I simply replied with a smile, "Sweetheart, find yourself a new place to live." Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who know the least about you. I spent 35 years building a successful career in real estate, starting as an assistant and eventually owning my own brokerage firm with 20 agents working under me. I specialized in luxury properties in the Chicago suburbs, quietly accumulating wealth while maintaining a modest lifestyle. My husband Richard and I believed in living below our means and investing wisely. Richard was my rock, my partner in everything. We met in college, married at 23, and spent nearly 40 years together before pancreatic cancer took him 3 years ago. The doctors gave him 6 months, but my stubborn Richard held on for 11, fighting every step of the way. I took early retirement at 58 to care for him full-time, treasuring every moment we had left together. "Promise me you'll live fully when I'm gone," he whispered during one of his final lucid moments. "Don't let grief keep you from enjoying the life we built." I tried to honor that promise, though the emptiness of our 4-bedroom suburban home was sometimes overwhelming. We'd purchased it 30 years ago when it was a modest fixer-upper in an emerging neighborhood. Now, thanks to development and our renovations, it was worth nearly $1 million. To most of our friends and family, it appeared to be our primary asset. What they didn't know was that Richard and I had methodically built a diverse investment portfolio over decades. We owned rental properties in Florida, and Arizona had substantial stock investments, bonds, and several high-yield savings accounts. We lived comfortably but frugally, driving our cars for 10 years before replacing them, taking one nice vacation annually and investing the rest. Our only child, Mark, grew up with everything he needed, but not everything he wanted. We paid for his college education and helped with the down payment on his first condo, but we also instilled the importance of working for what you have. At least we tried to. Mark was always a bit spoiled, despite our best efforts. As an only child, it was hard not to indulge him. He was handsome like his father, with the same warm brown eyes and charming smile that could talk you into almost anything. He had a good heart, but lacked Richard's work ethic and determination. He bounced between jobs and marketing, never quite finding his footing or living up to his potential. 2 years ago at 40, Mark married Katherine, a 32-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative he'd been dating for just 8 months. She was undeniably beautiful, with her perfectly highlighted blonde hair, gym-sculpted figure, and designer wardrobe. She was also undeniably materialistic. "She's a bit young for him, don't you think?" my sister Judith whispered at the wedding reception. "Age doesn't matter if they're right for each other," I replied, though I shared her concerns. Katherine immediately started pressuring Mark to level up their lifestyle. The modest condo I'd helped him buy wasn't good enough. She wanted a house in the right neighborhood, luxury cars, and expensive vacations she proudly displayed on social media. Then the pandemic hit. Both Mark and Katherine lost their jobs as companies downsized. Their savings evaporated quickly, especially with Katherine's spending habits. After 3 months of struggling to pay their mortgage, Mark called me with the question I'd been expecting. "Mom, we're in a tight spot. Would it be possible for us to stay with you until we get back on our feet, just for a few months?" I thought of my empty house with its quiet rooms. Perhaps some company would be nice. "Of course, honey. This house is too big for just me anyway." Little did I know that this decision would turn my peaceful life upside down and eventually lead to that fateful dinner where Katherine showed her true colors to everyone. When Mark and Katherine first moved in, I genuinely tried to make them feel welcome. I cleared out Richard's home office for them to use as a space to job hunt and set up the guest bedroom with fresh linens and extra storage. "Thank you for taking us in, Eileen," Katherine said, giving me a brief hug. "We won't be in your hair for long, I promise." The first week went smoothly. Katherine cooked dinner twice, Mark helped with yard work, and we watched movies together in the evenings. I found myself enjoying the company after years of rattling around the house alone. but subtle changes began appearing around my home. I returned from grocery shopping one day to find my living room completely rearranged. The family photos I'd carefully displayed were now boxed up, replaced by minimalist decor items Katherine had brought from their condo. "I hope you don't mind," she said when I asked about it. "The feng shui was all wrong before. This opens up the energy flow." I bit my tongue, not wanting to create tension so early in our arrangement. It was just furniture, after all. Soon, Katherine started making comments about my habits and lifestyle. "Do you always cook with so much butter?" she asked, wrinkling her nose as I prepared Richard's grandmother's chicken recipe. No wonder Mark struggled with his weight as a teenager. "Your wardrobe could use a refresh, Eileen," she remarked another day. "Those elastic waist pants age you at least 10 years. I could help you shop for something more current." Each comment stung, but I reminded myself this was temporary. What bothered me more was how Mark remained silent during these exchanges, sometimes even nodding in agreement. "Your mother is so set in her ways," I overheard Katherine telling Mark one evening. "It's like she stopped living in 1995. "Mom's generation is different," Mark replied with a chuckle that hurt more than Katherine's original comment. "They don't adapt to change the way we do." The dynamic shifted further when Katherine invited her friends over without asking. I came home from my book club to find 6 young women drinking wine in my kitchen, music blaring using my good crystal glasses. "Oh, Eileen, come meet everyone," Katherine called out clearly a few glasses in. "Girls, this is Mark's mom. She's letting us crash here until the job market improves." The way she phrased it made me sound like a casual acquaintance, not the homeowner who was providing them free housing. Things deteriorated further when I discovered Katherine had sold a pair of antique silver candlesticks that had belonged to my grandmother. I found them missing from the dining room buffet where they'd always stood. "Oh, those old things," Katherine said dismissively when confronted. "They were tarnished and outdated. I sold them on eBay and got us a modern centerpiece instead. See, it matches the new placemats." "Those were family heirlooms," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "They weren't yours to sell." "Don't be so attached to stuff, Eileen," she said with a patronizing smile. "It's not healthy." When I told Mark about the incident, he shrugged it off. "Katherine has a good eye for design, Mom, and those candlesticks were just collecting dust." I called my friend Barbara in tears that night. "I don't recognize my son anymore," I confessed. "He lets Katherine walk all over me in my own home." "You need to set boundaries," Barbara advised, "or they'll keep pushing until there's nothing left of your space or your dignity." I knew she was right, but setting boundaries had never been my strong suit, especially with Mark. After Richard died, I'd been so afraid of losing my connection with my only child that I'd become even more accommodating. Meanwhile, Katherine's comments about my finances became increasingly frequent. "Social Security doesn't provide much, does it?" she asked one day while watching me balance my checkbook. "And I bet Richard's life insurance wasn't substantial. It must be hard living on such a fixed income." I never corrected her assumptions. Richard and I had always been private about our finances, believing that wealth shouldn't be flaunted. Our modest lifestyle belied our actual net worth, and I saw no reason to enlighten Katherine about the millions carefully invested and managed by my financial advisor. The situation reached a new low when Katherine began hosting impromptu parties without warning me. I'd come home from running errands to find strangers in my living room drinking my wine and using my home as if it were their own. "You should have texted if you needed the house to yourself tonight," Katherine said, when I expressed surprise at finding 15 people gathered for a dinner party I knew nothing about. "We assumed you'd be out with your senior friends." By the 3rd month of their stay, Katherine had effectively taken control of my home. She changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me, claiming it was more secure this way. She reorganized the kitchen so that my everyday dishes were now stored in the highest cabinets, difficult for me to reach. "It makes more sense for the things we use daily to be easily accessible," she explained when I couldn't find my favorite coffee mug. She began ordering groceries online, filling the refrigerator with kale smoothies and organic protein bars, while forgetting to include the foods I enjoyed. When I mentioned this, she launched into a lecture about the dangers of processed foods for people your age. Mark watched this gradual takeover with apparent approval. "Katherine is really making this place more functional, isn't she, Mom?" he said one morning as I struggled to find the coffee filters that had been in the same drawer for 20 years but were now mysteriously relocated. "You should try adapting to new systems," he suggested. "It's good for your brain to learn new patterns at your age, prevents cognitive decline." I stared at my son, wondering when he had started speaking to me as if I were an aging patient rather than his mother. Where was the boy who once brought me breakfast in bed every Mother's Day, who called me his hero when he graduated from college? Katherine complained constantly about not having her own space, despite occupying half my house rent-free. She began suggesting renovations, talking about knocking down walls and updating the dated decor. "This house has so much potential," she said, walking around my living room like a property developer. "With the right updates, it could be worth so much more." "I'm not planning to sell," I reminded her. She exchanged a look with Mark that made me uneasy. "Everyone needs to downsize eventually," she replied. The situation deteriorated further when Katherine began telling family and friends that she and Mark were taking care of me in my old age. At 62, I was hardly infirm. I exercised daily, handled all my own affairs, and until their arrival had maintained my home beautifully on my own. "It's such a burden," I overheard her telling her mother on the phone. "She's completely dependent on us now. We can't possibly move out and leave her alone." This fiction infuriated me, but when I confronted Mark, he seemed to have bought into it himself. "Mom, you have been a little forgetful lately," he said, citing the time I misplaced my car keys, something that happens to people of all ages. The final insult came when Katherine's friends visited, and one of them asked about my technology skills. "Oh, Eileen is hopeless with anything digital." Katherine laughed. "We had to set up auto payments for all her bills because she couldn't figure out online banking." In reality, I had been managing my investments online for years and had actually taught Richard how to use digital banking. But Katherine had created this narrative of me as a helpless old woman, and Mark allowed it to continue. One afternoon, I came home earlier than expected from a doctor's appointment and found Katherine in my bedroom rifling through my file cabinet. "What are you doing?" I asked, startled to find her among my most personal documents. She barely flinched. "Looking for the house insurance policy. Mark and I were discussing adding our names since we're living here now." "Those are private papers," I said firmly, "and you won't be added to my home insurance or anything else." Katherine's expression darkened. "We're family now, Eileen. There shouldn't be secrets between family." That night I heard them arguing in their bedroom. "We need to know what's in her will," Katherine was saying. "What if something happens to her? This house could go to some cousin we've never met." "I can't just ask her about that," Mark replied. "Why not?" "You're her only child. It's a reasonable conversation to have." And I stood frozen in the hallway, finally understanding that Katherine wasn't just inconsiderate or entitled. She was actively plotting to ensure she got my assets when I died. And my son was at the very least not opposing her. The next morning, I overheard Katherine on the phone with a friend saying words that chilled me to the bone. "Just waiting for the old lady to kick the bucket, then we'll have this whole place to ourselves. The location alone makes it worth the wait." The monthly family dinner was a tradition I had maintained even after Richard's death. My sister Judith, her husband Frank, my brother Robert, his wife Susan, and occasionally their adult children would gather at my house for a meal and catch up. It was something I looked forward to, a connection to normalcy in my increasingly chaotic home life. Katherine had insisted on helping with this month's dinner, which meant taking over completely. She planned an elaborate menu beyond my usual pot roast and vegetables, ordering expensive ingredients and artisanal desserts that she pointedly mentioned the cost of several times. "Don't worry about the expense, Eileen," she said with false generosity. "We're happy to contribute, even though we're between jobs right now." She had transformed my dining room with new table linens, centerpieces, and place settings I'd never seen before. When I asked where my grandmother's china was, she vaguely mentioned it being safely stored somewhere. As my family arrived, Katherine played hostess, greeting everyone at the door as if it were her home, directing them to seats she'd assigned with little calligraphy place cards. "Eileen, you're at the end," she instructed, pointing to the chair furthest from the kitchen, traditionally where guests sat, not the homeowner. Throughout the appetizer course, Katherine dominated the conversation, interrupting whenever I began to speak and redirecting attention to herself. I caught Judith giving me concerned glances, but I simply shook my head slightly. Not now. The tension in the room was palpable when conversation turned to finances and the challenging job market. Mark has had several promising interviews. I mentioned trying to focus on positives, but nothing that matches his skill level and worth, Katherine quickly added. He's being patient for the right executive position. Sometimes you have to start somewhere and work your way back up, Robert suggested gently. After the recession in 2008, I took a step back before finding my current role. Katherine's expression soured. Mark deserves better than entry-level positions. He was a director before the layoffs. How are you two managing financially during the job search? Susan asked innocently. It must be stressful. Mark looked uncomfortable. We're getting by. Mom's been generous letting us stay here. Eileen has always been the family lifeline, Judith said warmly. Remember when she helped me with the down payment on my first house, or when she paid for Robert's emergency dental surgery when his insurance wouldn't cover it? You've helped everyone, sis, Robert agreed, never asking for anything in return. I saw something dark flash across Katherine's face. Her cheeks flushed red and her knuckles whitened around her fork. Well, isn't that convenient for everyone? She said in a tight voice. Eileen, the eternal benefactor. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Mark placed his hand on Katherine's arm, but she shook it off. What's that supposed to mean? Judith asked, her voice carrying a warning. Katherine stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Her next words came out as a near shout, her finger pointed directly at me. Get a job and stop being a leech! The room froze. Water glasses stopped midway to lips. Forks hovered over plates. Every eye turned to me. You've been living off your dead husband's money while we struggle, Katherine continued, her voice rising hysterically. Sitting in this big house all day doing nothing while Mark stresses about finding work. You should be downsizing, contributing, doing something productive instead of being a burden on society. The accusation was so ridiculous, so completely opposite to reality, that I couldn't help myself. I burst out laughing. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a nervous titter. It was a full, genuine laugh that bubbled up from deep inside me. The kind of laugh Richard and I used to share over absurd situations. My reaction clearly wasn't what Katherine expected. Her tirade halted mid-sentence, confusion replacing rage in her expression. What's so funny? She demanded. I'm being serious. I took a deep breath, composing myself while dabbing at the corners of my eyes with my napkin. The entire table remained silent, waiting. Katherine, dear, I said, my voice calm and measured. I've tolerated your rudeness, your entitlement, and your disrespect for months now. I've watched you rearrange my home, insult me to my face, and treat me like an unwelcome guest in my own house. But this crosses a line. I placed my napkin carefully beside my plate and looked directly at her. Sweetheart, find yourself a new place to live. What? Mark interjected, finally finding his voice. You heard me. I continued, my voice steady. You have 30 days to find alternative accommodation. I'll even help you pack. Katherine's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish out of water. You can't do that, Mark. Tell her she can't do that. Actually, I can, I replied. My name is the only one on the deed to this house. You are guests, increasingly unwelcome ones, and I'm giving you notice to vacate, as is my legal right. But Mom, Mark stammered, where will we go? We can't afford rent in this area. That sounds like a problem you and Katherine will need to solve, I said, rising from my chair. Now, who would like coffee with dessert? I believe Katherine ordered a lovely cheesecake. After everyone left their departures, awkwardly expedited by the dramatic scene at dinner, I asked Mark to join me in Richard's study. Katherine attempted to follow, but I held up my hand. This conversation is between my son and me, I said firmly. You can wait in the living room. She started to protest, but Mark shook his head. Please, Kath, just give us a few minutes. Once the door closed behind us, I sat in Richard's old leather chair and gestured for Mark to take a seat opposite me. There's something you should know. I began unlocking the bottom drawer of the desk and removing a leather portfolio. Something your father and I chose not to share with you before. Mark watched silently as I spread out several financial statements, property deeds, and investment portfolios on the desk between us. What is all this? He asked, his eyes widening as he scanned the documents. "This," I said, pointing to a statement from Vanguard, "is a diversified stock portfolio currently valued at just over $2 million. These," I continued, showing him 2 property deeds, "are rental homes in Naples, Florida and Scottsdale, Arizona that generate approximately $8,000 in monthly income. And these," I laid out several bank statements, "are various savings and money market accounts totaling around $1.5 million. Mark's face had gone pale. "Mom, you're worth approximately $5 million, I finished for him. "Not including this house and my personal possessions." He sat back in his chair, visibly stunned. "Why didn't you tell me? Your father and I agreed long ago that flaunting wealth doesn't build character. We wanted you to develop a strong work ethic and sense of responsibility. Perhaps we were wrong to keep you in the dark, but we hoped you'd learn to stand on your own feet without expecting an inheritance to solve your problems." "All this time," Mark murmured, "Katherine thought you were struggling on Social Security and a small pension." "I never corrected her assumptions," I acknowledged, and frankly, her behavior toward me made me increasingly reluctant to share the truth. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because you need to understand that I'm not kicking you out of cruelty or spite. I'm doing it because both of you need to grow up and take responsibility for yourselves. You're 42 years old, Mark. Your father was running his own business at your age." I leaned forward, looking directly into my son's eyes. "I'm willing to help you, financially, but only if you demonstrate that you're serious about becoming independent again. That means finding a job, any job to start, and treating people with respect, including me." "And Katherine?" he asked quietly. "That's between you and her," I replied. "But I won't subsidize someone who has shown me nothing but disrespect and entitlement since the day she entered my home." Mark ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard that it made my heart ache. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now, but you do need to start packing. The 30-day timeline stands." As Mark left the study, looking shell-shocked, I heard Katherine's voice immediately demand, "Well, what did she say? Did you convince her to let us stay?" I couldn't hear Mark's response, but Katherine's reaction was loud enough to penetrate the closed door. "What do you mean she's a millionaire? That's impossible. She lives like someone who doesn't measure their worth by material possessions," I murmured to myself, running my hand over Richard's leather desk blotter. Katherine burst into the study without knocking, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and calculation. "Eileen, there's clearly been a misunderstanding," she began, her voice suddenly honeyed. "My comment at dinner was completely out of line, and I sincerely apologize. I've been stressed about our financial situation and took it out on you unfairly." I regarded her calmly. "3 hours ago you called me a leech. Now that you know I have money, you're apologizing. That's not sincerity, Katherine. That's opportunism." No, I felt terrible about my behavior for weeks," she insisted. "I was going to apologize anyway. The timing is just unfortunate." "The timing is perfect, actually," I replied. "It's shown everyone exactly who you are and what you value. Mark and I can change. We'll be more respectful of your space. We can even pay rent. My decision is final," I said, standing to indicate the conversation was over. 30 days, not a day more." As she stormed out, I sat alone in Richard's study, feeling a complex mixture of sadness and relief. Part of me mourned the relationship with my son that might never be the same. But another part, a stronger part, felt as though I'd finally honored Richard's parting wish. I was standing up for myself and refusing to let grief or maternal guilt keep me from living fully. "You'd be proud of me tonight, wouldn't you?" I whispered, touching the photograph of Richard on the desk. In the stillness of the room, I could almost hear his warm chuckle of approval. The days following the dinner confrontation were tense and uncomfortable. Katherine oscillated between tearful apologies and cold silence, while Mark seemed caught in a state of confused reassessment. They began reluctantly boxing up their belongings, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. While Katherine was out one afternoon, presumably apartment hunting, Mark approached me in the garden where I was pruning roses. "Mom, I need to apologize," he said, sitting on the bench beside me. "Not just for Katherine's behavior, but for mine, too. I've been self-centered and disrespectful." I continued carefully trimming dead blooms, giving him space to continue. "I let Katherine change the way I saw you. Somehow I started thinking of you as just an aging mother who needed our help, not as the strong, capable woman who raised me. I forgot everything you and Dad taught me about working hard and respecting others." I set down my garden shears and looked at my son. "Why, Mark? What happened to the values we raised you with?" He shook his head, genuine shame in his expression. "I got lazy. It was easier to let Katherine take charge, to blame our problems on circumstances rather than take responsibility. And somewhere along the way, I started believing I deserved success without having to work for it." This admission, painful as it was to hear, gave me hope that my son might find his way back to the person Richard and I had raised him to be. With my ultimatum in place, Mark finally began taking his job search seriously. Within 2 weeks, he had secured a position at a marketing firm, not at the director level he'd held before, but a solid mid-level role with potential for advancement. Katherine, meanwhile, had been calling every family member and friend, painting herself as the victim of a cruel mother-in-law. Most saw through her manipulation, having witnessed her outburst at dinner firsthand. "She actually called me to complain about you," my sister Judith reported during our weekly lunch. "Said you were heartlessly throwing them out when they had nowhere to go. I reminded her that adults typically pay for their own housing, and she hung up on me." With Mark's new income, they found a modest 2-bedroom apartment about 30 minutes away, a far cry from the luxury home Katherine had envisioned, but well within their means if they both worked. Katherine made one last attempt to change my mind the day before they moved out. "Eileen, I've been thinking about our future as a family," she began, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Mark and I want to start having children soon, and it would be so special for them to grow up in this house with their grandmother nearby." "That's an interesting pivot from telling me to get a job and stop being a leech," I replied mildly. She had the grace to flush. "People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. I truly do value you as Mark's mother and my mother-in-law." "Katherine," I said, setting down my coffee cup, "you don't value me as a person. You see me as a means to an end, whether that's free housing or access to my money. That's not a foundation for a healthy family relationship. So that's it. You're cutting us off completely." Her true concern revealed itself. "I'm not cutting off Mark. I'll always be there for my son. But my relationship with you will depend entirely on your actions moving forward, not your words." After they moved out, I reclaimed my home room by room. I retrieved my grandmother's china from where Katherine had hidden it in the basement. I rearranged the furniture back to the comfortable configuration I preferred. I rehung family photos and placed Richard's books back on the living room shelves. With the house to myself again, I met with my financial advisor to update my estate plans. I established a trust for Mark that would provide for him while incentivizing work and responsibility. Half of my estate would go to him directly, while the other half would be distributed in portions contingent on employment and charitable work. "This is quite detailed," my advisor commented, reviewing the conditions. "I want to support my son, not enable dependence," I explained. Richard would have wanted the same. Barbara organized what she called a liberation celebration with my closest friends. "To Eileen," she toasted, raising her wine glass, "who finally showed her backbone of steel." I found myself laughing more freely than I had in years. Richard always said I was too accommodating for my own good. "Well, you certainly proved you can stand your ground when it counts," my friend Mary added. "I wish I could have seen Katherine's face when you told her to leave." In the months that followed, I embraced my independence with renewed energy. I volunteered at the local literacy center teaching adult reading classes. I joined a travel group for solo seniors and booked trips to Portugal and New Zealand, destinations Richard and I had always planned to visit together. Mark called weekly, our conversations gradually becoming more open and honest. He was working diligently at his new job and had received positive feedback from his managers. "They're talking about putting me on the leadership track," he shared one Sunday evening. "Said my perspective and work ethic are exactly what they're looking for." "I'm proud of you," I told him sincerely. "Your father would be too." Katherine made occasional attempts to re-establish contact, always with thinly veiled references to my finances or the house. I maintained polite but firm boundaries, refusing to be manipulated again. One evening, Mark called, sounding more serious than usual. "Mom, can we meet for lunch tomorrow? Just the two of us. There's something important I need to talk to you about." We met at Richard's favorite Italian restaurant, a cozy family-owned place where the owner still remembered my husband's preference for extra garlic bread. Mark was already seated when I arrived, looking more mature somehow, as if the past 6 months had aged him in ways beyond the calendar. "You look well, Mom," he said, standing to hug me. "That new haircut suits you." "Thank you. You look tired," I replied honestly, noting the shadows under his eyes. He smiled ruefully. "It's been an adjustment going back to a full-time job and managing our finances on a stricter budget." Over antipasto, Mark spoke about his new position and the mentorship he was receiving from one of the senior partners. For the first time in years, I heard genuine enthusiasm in his voice when discussing work. "I've realized something," he said as our main courses arrived. "All those years Dad tried to teach me about working hard and living within my means. I thought he was just being strict or old-fashioned. Now I understand he was trying to give me the tools for a stable, self-sufficient life." "Your father was a wise man," I said softly. "He worried we might have made things too easy for you." Mark nodded, pushing pasta around his plate. "You did, but that doesn't excuse how I've behaved as an adult, or how I let Katherine treat you." There it was, the elephant in the room. "How are things with Katherine?" I asked carefully. He set down his fork and looked directly at me. "We're in couples counseling. After everything that happened, we needed professional help to work through our issues." "That's a positive step." "It is, but it's also revealed some hard truths." He took a deep breath. "Katherine and I want very different things. She's still focused on status and appearances, while I'm finally understanding what real security and happiness look like." "These realizations can be painful," I acknowledged. "The counselor helped me see how I enabled her worst instincts and how disrespectful we both were to you." His voice cracked slightly. "Mom, I am so deeply sorry for how I treated you after Dad died. You deserved better from your only son." The sincerity in his eyes reminded me so much of Richard that my heart ached. "I forgive you, Mark, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. We need to rebuild trust between us." "I know. That's part of why I wanted to see you today." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." Inside was a check for $12,000, the exact amount I'd calculated they had saved by living in my home rent-free for 6 months. "Mark, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted firmly. "It's not about the money. It's about acknowledging that I took advantage of your generosity without appreciation or respect. Please accept it." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a glimmer of the man Richard and I had hoped he would become. "I'll accept this on one condition. Name it. That you put an equal amount into your own savings or retirement fund. Your financial security matters to me." He smiled a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Already done. The counselor helped me set up automatic transfers to a savings account. I'm building an emergency fund for the first time in my life." As we shared dessert, Mark asked about my travel plans and volunteering, showing interest in my life in a way he hadn't for years. "Katherine still doesn't understand why you won't help us buy a house," he admitted. "She thinks families should support each other financially." "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think I need to stand on my own 2 feet. Dad was right all along. There's pride in earning your own way that can't be replaced with handouts." Before we parted, Mark hugged me tightly. "I miss Dad," he whispered. "I wish I could tell him I finally understand what he was trying to teach me." "He knows," I assured him, blinking back tears. "Wherever he is, he knows." In the following months, I established the Second Chances Scholarship Fund for middle-aged women returning to education. Using a portion of my investment income, I created opportunities for women who, like me, had prioritized family over career advancement, but now wanted to pursue their own goals. "I wish I'd had something like this when I was trying to restart my life after Tom left," Barbara commented at the launch event. "It's never too late to reinvent yourself," I replied, thinking of my own journey since Richard's death. Mark's marriage to Katherine eventually ended a development that saddened but didn't surprise me. He called to tell me the news himself, his voice steady despite the circumstances. She couldn't accept the life we could actually afford, he explained, and I couldn't go back to pretending we were wealthier than we are. I'm sorry it ended this way, I told him sincerely. I'm not really, he replied. I'm becoming someone I can respect again, someone Dad would be proud of. As for me, I continue to live in the house where we raised our family, though I've finally renovated the kitchen with the marble countertops I'd always wanted. I travel several months of the year, volunteer regularly, and host weekly dinner parties for friends and family, my own terms, in my own home. The dinner table where Katherine once shouted at me to get a job now regularly hosts laughter, honest conversations, and the warmth of true friendship. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives lead us to the most necessary growth. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated or disrespected you? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of reclaiming your power resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and renewal. Remember to share with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves today. Thank you for joining me, and remember your worth is never determined by others' perception of you, but by the strength and dignity with which you live your life.